What if Sarah Palin became president? My name is Sheila Tobias, and this is my commentary. The election is not about Sarah Palin's celebrity status, nor her gender, however much that has been celebrated, nor her views on reproductive rights, women's health, creationism, and stem cell research, which are extreme. This election turns, or should turn, on a candidate's sound judgment, particularly in matters of national security. What was candidate McCain thinking when he picked Palin as his vice president? The selection of vice president gives the electorate its first hint as to the quality of a candidate's judgment. I lost much respect for George H.W. Bush when in 1988 he picked the woefully inexperienced Dan Quayle to be his running mate. I became less enthusiastic for John Kerry when he chose John Edwards, a one-time senator who had run a low-quality campaign against Kerry. And can anyone forget Nixon's choice of the notorious and corrupt Spiro Agnew? Spiro Agnew was the vice president who was forced to resign a few years later, even before Nixon had to do so. With McCain's Palin pick, we get a glimpse of a candidate so intent on winning that he is willing to put the country at risk. Whatever happened to country first, Mr. McCain? You have let us down. Yes, all of us. Not just Republicans, but all Americans who realize how much skill is expected of our chief executives, especially now and into the very difficult next few years. We have an economy to rebuild with a 21st century workforce, financial institutions, especially our housing lenders, to restore, a need to replace our dependence on foreign oil with alternate technologies. We have wars to avoid and foreign friends to reassure that sense and sanity will once again govern U.S. foreign policy. McCain knows a president is vulnerable. One of his heroes is Teddy Roosevelt, the vice president who became president in 1901 after an anarchist killed President McKinley. In my lifetime, 3 vice presidents have had to take over. Harry Truman, after Franklin Roosevelt died in office, Lyndon Johnson, after John F. Kennedy was killed in Dallas, and Gerald Ford, after Richard Nixon resigned. There might have been a 5th to replace President Woodrow Wilson when he became mentally and physically disabled in his 2nd term, a fact that with today's intrusive media could not be hidden from view, as it was in 1918. McCain may be in denial, but the voter cannot afford to be. The fact is, Sarah Palin might become president. She's never had a passport until this year, never ventured farther outside her country than to neighboring Canada until a quick trip in 2008 to get some bona fides by visiting the border of Iraq and Kuwait. Has she the capacity to rid Washington's bureaucracies of the culture of ethical failure that has taken over? Who needs to be reminded of what happens when political cronies are put in charge? Gonzales at Justice, the infamous "you're doing a great job, Brownie" at FEMA, Karl Rove in the White House. Only last week, the nation learned that oil rig regulators at the Department of the Interior are being bought off with money and drugs by oil companies that prefer not to be regulated. Would a President Palin be able to stand up to, actually outwit, the K Street lobbyists, ably steer legislation through both houses of Congress? Could she choose top-level appointments who serve the nation as well as the president? Can she, would she persuade Americans that global warming is not just part of God's plan, but it is our obligation and within our powers to halt? And what if there's a national security crisis, a Kurdish attack on Kirkuk, a meltdown in Afghanistan, an Israel move against Iran? Palin says she won't, quote, second-guess Israel. What does that mean? Even without Saddam Hussein playing chicken with the U.S., it will always be hard to contain violence in the Middle East. We live in a dangerous world. No one who lived through the horrors of 9/11 needs to be reminded that our enemies are no longer states we can invade and conquer with superior ground troops and high-tech weaponry. National security, as we learn to our eternal regret, requires being smarter than our enemies as well as strong. not like shooting hapless wolves from the air. Could Palin govern the country if called upon to do so? Could she, would she, choose policies and people that would allow us to survive and prosper? If your answer is no, then you must rethink your admiration for candidate McCain. Because with his first act as would-be chief executive, he has shown that for all his sacrifices and service to our nation, John McCain does not put country first. And that is the first and last obligation of the President of the United States.